All right, hello everybody. Thank you for coming to our session today. I'm Drew, and this is Sandy, and we're going to help you guys with your flows.
We hope.
Yes. I'm sorry if the accent gets to you guys. We're not from around here.
We are not.
So I'm Drew. I'm a senior Salesforce engineer for Clear. I've been doing Salesforce for about 10 years now, almost.
And I'm Sandi Zellner. I am also from the States, in the New York City area. And I'm currently working as a solution architect in a consulting firm called Crow. And Drew and I have been working together very closely within the Trailblazer community for quite a while now. He and I co-lead the user and admin, and we've just started an architects group in New York City. And we really love to come and talk to people about best practices and things that we've discovered that we did wrong, and we want to help you all not to do the same thing.
And one of the things that we've been hearing a lot about in the last year or so is a lot of people obviously are getting into flows for the first time. Salesforce is really, really into you using flows, but not everyone knows all the stuff that it can do and all the great things it can do to actually help you help your users better.
And a lot of people are kind of unfamiliar with the things that, first of all, Flow is a very powerful tool, but it can do a lot of bad things as well as good things. So our presentation today really is designed to help you, number one, avoid errors and issues with flows, but then if something goes wrong, to make sure your flow can gracefully handle them. So number one, you don't break your system, and number two, your users are none the wiser. So.
That being said, we are going to start with a couple of assumptions about you. And that's that you know what flow is, that you're in the right room, that you've had a little bit of experience, maybe you built a flow, maybe you've done some hands-on trainings on Trailhead, and you know the basics of building a flow, making it accessible to people.
Yes. When we share this presentation, we have hyperlinked to quite a number of resources. So the things that we're talking about, we would greatly recommend that you visit them. And don't forget to click the links at the bottom. That's where the best stuff is.
And we're gonna anything that we're gonna put up here as far as demos, we're gonna have a link to. You can download it at the end as well. Mm-hmm. Has this ever happened to you? I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna be honest with you. This is my email from a couple months ago. It has not gotten that much better yet, but we have a lot of flows that run on a very regular basis, and they don't always error, but every time they error, it represents a bad experience for the user. So this is my shame, and I'm sharing it with all of you today, and I hope you can accept me for it.
And then on the opposite side of that, those were the messages that the admin gets, right, when something goes wrong. But these are the types of messages that your users get. And oftentimes can be, number one, confusing. It gets in the way of their workflow. And what's the likelihood that this information is actually going to get to the person that knows how to fix it, right? Like, it didn't work. That's usually all you get from your user. So what we're going to be doing today is, number one, again, trying to avoid these things in the first place, but also give you a way to get the information you need to be able to fix these for them.
Also, as an admin, how many times has this actually helped you? Oh, it's your classic 5136037 error. Clearly.
How come I didn't know? Yes. So I started out as an admin about 9 years ago, knew absolutely nothing, and I'm learning more every day. And my big thing right now is thinking that flows are complex. They do a lot of things, but they break a lot. And so here are some common reasons that they do break. You've picked in your flow builder, you've picked the wrong field, the wrong reference. Okay, just double check to make sure you have the right one. We mapped the wrong variable. We're choosing the wrong type. This is a big one. The object and field level security for your user. If your user doesn't have access to do what you want it to do with that field, it's going to error out. Too many SQL queries. If you're asking the system to do too many things at once, you're going to hit some limits. Null values is a really good one, where in your decisions, you're asking your flow to do something if something happens, but are you saying, what should the system do if it can't find what you've asked it to find? And unhandled exceptions, which we are going to talk about. really how to easily.
Those damn developers and their unhandled exceptions.
I know. It's basically the system doesn't know what to do when it can't do what you've asked it to do. Okay, and again, there is a beautiful Salesforce help article that customizes what happens when your flow fails. That's linked in there. A lot of information we're going to talk about is actually in these articles.
So yeah, so they actually do try to make it very easy for you guys to find what's wrong with your flows. I spend a lot of time in the failed flow interviews. I hope you guys do too. Well, I hope you guys don't have that many failed flows as I do, but I spend a lot of time in here. It's a great way to see when your flows errored out. They all write into here, and you can go through and you can see what it did. We'll show another in a second what it looks like when you go into these flow interviews, but it'll show you exactly what happened, what were the inputs, what were the outputs, and how you got to your failures. Actually, a very important thing that I found recently, there's a setting in the process automation settings, which is somewhere probably further down here, where you can say, so those emails, my secret shame that I showed you earlier, only emails to the person who last activated the flow by default. So I have a team of 4 people. I don't necessarily see all the errors because my other person activated the flow. They see the errors, they don't tell me about it, I don't know there's a problem. So there's a setting where you can go and say anyone who gets the Apex exception emails also gets the flow error emails. I did that and my email box got way bigger. But at least, but the most important thing is knowing about it, because how many times have your users had a problem and they just live with it and are secretly hating you for it but never tell you about it? Show of hands. How would you know? They don't tell you about it. Trick question. No, I'm kidding. But it happens to all of us. And so knowing about the issues is the first step to getting through all this stuff. Bless you.
All right. So I like to call myself an awesome admin, even though I've kind of don't do admin stuff every day anymore. And I kind of like the nerd emoji is my favorite one because I'm a huge nerd.
It's in here a few times.
It is. I don't know. But okay, so one of the things that we're going to want to do to be able to get the right information to handle these issues and then solve them is to be able to know about it. And one of the things that you should be doing in your flows is creating a fault path for every single action that you're asking the flow to take, which is those the pink things. If you're asking your system to create something, delete something, send an email, every time you have inside your flow, it's going to do something. You want to give it a thing to do if it goes wrong. So if you want to make sure that you choose your fault path for every single one, and then, which we'll show you a little bit more in a moment. But over here, there is a setting in process automation that says let admins test the flow as another user. You're going to want to make sure that you're testing your flow in the context of the user that will be doing it every single time.
Yes, if you run it yourself, it's going to work because you're an admin.
Yes, and one of the things that I do to make it a little easier to have a fault path for every single action that I'm taking in my flow is I create a subflow that is specifically designed to handle my errors. I give it a place that I can put the variables from my parent flow into it, and then my subflow will then, it tells me all of the information about the error message that happened, the user that it happened with, the record variable, identification number, ID, and it will send me an email, or you can make a chatter message, you could do a custom notification. The way that you notify somebody is up to you, but I use a subflow so I can just plug it into every single flow and I don't have to redo it all the time. We will be sharing the subflow too.
So this is what I was talking about earlier with the, when you go into your flows, this is a very simple flow, so it's only got one step. But if this were a multiple flow, it will show you exactly through like every single branch that the yellow line will show you exactly the path that your flow took up until the point it errored. Which is a great tool for you to you easily see right down to like, okay, it passed that check, it passed that check. I mean, it's all, you can read through the whole thing too, but it will also, it's a much more visual way of looking at it.
Yes, but in this case, if you don't give the system a fault,
yes,
an error handler, a fault path, excuse me, it just won't work.
Yeah.
It's a very simple reason that this won't work. There's no email address for this to send an email to. It's going to fail. But we don't know.
Right.
So when we set the fault path, which I believe is the next one.
Yes, this is the video.
Woohoo. Yeah, so thank you for pressing play. In this case, my intent was to send an email to the account owner, but if there's for some reason the email is bad or in there, so I can go into my subflow that I've created, and I'm just passing the variables that are actually in from the flow that we get. I mean, Salesforce supplies us with these pieces of information, the error message, the date and time that it happened, which record is it on, and so forth. So we're going to plug all of that information into the subflow, and then when it fails, it will send me an email with the information of why. Which record was it happening on? So I can go back and fix it.
Was that the one? Okay. Yeah, and like I said, a lot of things that cause issues with your flows, check your first. The biggest thing that ever happens to me is you check your access. Flows have the ability to set them to run as system. Don't do it. Oh. If you can avoid it, don't do it, because you're just giving your users access to do all kinds of horrible things that they're not going to do intentionally, but they're going to break something horrible.
Yeah. So, and plug into that subflow, pass your parent flow variables right in there. You'll have them. Make sure you're giving a decision in your flow when you're looking for something. If the flow can't find it, what should I do? Mm-hmm. So how to handle null values and set a fault path on every single action.
Any of the pink actions, any of the dark blue actions, set a fault path.
Yes. And it can be the same fault path.
Yeah,
right?
You can put them all to the same one.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So everything we've shown you so far and everything we're going to show you in the future is at this link. You can scan the QR code while we got it up here. We'll give you a second. The password to install it in your org is AstraRocks23, capital A, capital R. And instructions are in the package for everything.
And I do have to say it's not 100% perfect, but it's a really good start.
None of us
and
are
if you
100%
find
perfect.
anything that you think would be an improvement, please let me know. But that subflow is right there. You can use it as you like.
What does the subflow do so it sends email?
Yes.
Well, yes.
It does. The one that I chose is it sends an email with the variables of the flow error message, the time, what user.
Do you not get that from the flow error email?
Well,
You do, but
yes.
what happens if maybe you have a big team and 5 people are working on different flows? If I'm the person that made that flow, but Drew is the default email handler user, he's going to get that information and I don't.
And also,
right?
The subflow, for the purposes of being quick, it does send an email, but you can do anything that a
Yes.
flow can do. You can have it create if you want to create a custom object that tracks all of your flow failures
Yep.
for you. If you want to create, you can have it send platform events. You
Yep.
can have it do chatter messages, notifications in the Slack at the top of the bar. Slack messages are going to be a thing you can do. Anything a flow can do, you can do in this error handling subflow.
Yes. Slack message to an error
Yeah, Slack. Yes.
channel would be great.
Yes.
I don't know, get a little overwhelmed, but.
So I'm gonna I admitted at the beginning that I am a developer. So we're gonna talk about Apex for a little bit, and I don't want you to be scared. I know Apex can be a little bit unapproachable sometimes, but for the purposes of testing, it's really not that bad. And I did all of this stuff that I'm showing you in the developer console in Salesforce. I didn't use any special developer tools. I just did it all here so I can take screenshots and show you how it all works. Now, why do you want to use Apex tests for your flows? One, you can automate them. You can control how, you can have it every time something is deployed, every time you're doing a deployment, every time you're doing a change set from a sandbox. My poll that I asked you guys was, how many of you edit your flows in production? Only a few of you are going to keep me up at night by saying always, and a few more are going to keep you up at night by saying there's another option. Everyone else said pretty much sometimes or never, which is the good answer, because you can really do a lot of damage with flows in production. If you don't know, and not even if if you just hit the wrong thing, all of a sudden, if your record trigger flows are breaking, no one can write accounts or opportunities, and you're going to get some very angry phone calls. So we're going to cover how you can do Apex tests, what they do, why you want to run them. And like I said, you go into the developer console, you say you want to create an Apex class, you name it, you give it a, and then you can go into the testing and you can run it. Are these out of, are we missing some? Okay. I think we're missing some slides in here.
We are?
I think so. So I can wing it. So the most important thing to know before you write your tests is you need to know what your flow does. To test your flow, you must first understand your flow. So basically, if you've ever done user stories, it's the same basic concept. When given an account of a certain type, enters this flow, it should come out this way. And basically what you're going to do is, I want to come over to the altogether now. There's a few key components of a test. First, you're going to have to create your test data. And the reason why you need to create test data, I'm going to go over here so I can point at the beginning of the lines. The reason why you're going to want to create test data is because your tests do not see any of your actual data. They run in a separate sandbox of just whatever data it has. So it can't make any changes to your actual data. It can't see any of your actual data. So you're going to create your record. In this case, we're just creating an account. Same as you'd be doing with anything. It's an account, new account, name, test account, whatever other required fields you have to put in, you'll put in there. Then you're going to tell Apex to start the test. That just makes sure that everything that would have happened, like if you have any automations around inserting an account or an opportunity, make sure that they all run and that it is in a idle state and just ready to go for you to actually do your test. In this case, we're testing a flow that if a record is updated, where the do the thing field is set to true, it's going to do a thing, and it's going to. So I'm basically going to you make the change that is going to start your flow. So in this case, we're just updating this field on the account. We're saying update the account, and then we stop the test. Same way that we started the test to make sure that everything finishes before it starts. We're stopping the test to make sure that your flow and anything that happens in that process is done before it starts doing your checks. And your checks are going to be, you're going to run a query. If you've ever done SOQL, it's, it looks, for a simple query like this, it's not that difficult, but it can be a little bit daunting when the first time you see it, just to see it. But you're going to basically get your record that you updated, and you're going to check and you're going to do the assertions. Any test without assertions is really only half done. Because you can say that the flow ran, and if we've got your proper flow error handling set up, it's not going to throw any exceptions, and you're going to say it's done, but if it didn't actually do the things you want to do, then it doesn't really matter that it ran. So that's where you're going to do your assertions. And this is the part where the test will fail if the assertions don't work. You're also going to want to test it for different scenarios. So if you're doing so I have a test here for if I put one account into it. That way, that's just the basic standard. But what if you have a person who does a bulk data load of 5,000 accounts into your database, and the flow has to run on all of them, and you wouldn't know that you had something happen, too many queries exception or something that would have happened. Doesn't happen on one, but happens on 50 or happens on 100. So now you want to go and you want to create same concept, and like I said, this is all going to be available on in the package and on GitHub when we're done here. Same thing, it's just a little bit bigger because I'm going to, instead of creating one account, I'm going to create 200 in one shot, and then I'm going to update all 200 of those in the same shot, and then I'm going to test to make sure that all 200 of them came through the test completely. And then the other thing that's in here that's very important is flows can be turned on and off in production. This is what I was saying, how many of you do your test in production. Apex tests cannot. If you put a test in production, it's going to run every time, not just on your flows, but anytime if you have developers that are deploying any Apex, it's going to run those tests. So if you turn off your flow in production, or you change the version of the flow, or if you make any changes, and that test isn't updated for it, all of a sudden your tests are going to fail. And so one of the things that I built, and like I said, this will all be in you can copy all this out of the GitHub that I posted. I put a little thing in here that's this. All it does, it looks like a lot of stuff, but all it does is looks and sees if the flow, my flow that does the thing flow, if it is active, and if it's active, then it'll run my test. It'll do my assertions. If not, it'll just skip it because I'm not expecting this to be done because my flow is not turned on. And you don't want your developers to be mad at you because you wrote a test, and then all of a sudden their stuff is breaking. Yes, sure. I'm sorry, what was that? Yes, so we're going to get to that at the very end. Salesforce is slowly putting me out of business. So this is, like I said, this is everything that we have here. You can take pictures of it, but I'm going to have it all for you in a minute. And here, if you go here, this is going to take you to my GitHub page. It's going to just have that entire this entire page is going to be right there for you. Feel free to copy it and use it in good health. And then I think all we have left after that is, oh, that's right, I'll go to that in a second. I'll give you guys a second to take this picture. I'll talk about how Salesforce is putting me on a job, and then we'll come back to this we'll come back to these for the Q&A. So, Summer 22 has come out with a beta of record triggered flow testing. It's a lot of what I just showed, but it's, declarative. It's not fully replacing Apex testing yet because this is a beta, and you know how Salesforce does with their betas and their releases. In like 3 releases, this will probably be a great product. But it's the same concept. You're going to set up your test data. You're going to set your assertions to make sure that whatever is done at the end is true or false, and then you're going to run your test. I don't know if this has any automation capabilities to it yet, but this is definitely something I'm keeping an eye on. But again, like if you do with the Apex testing, anytime any change is made, if you're doing change sets into production, you can tell it to run your Apex test. I don't know yet if this is being able to run on deployments or anything like that yet.
Not sure either.
And I'm sure it will by the time they get. I hope. My dream is that by the time when this is GA and fully ready, at some point after that, I hope they start requiring tests because, like I said, you can do a lot of good, but you can also do a lot of damage with flows. And if they're not working properly, one of the things I do love about this is you can take one of those failed flow interviews from the beginning, and you can say convert it to a flow. And the reason why that's great, convert it to a test rather. And one of the reasons why that's great is because you can say, I saw this error, I fixed that flow, let me turn this interview into a test that runs whenever I'm doing these so I can make sure that specific error doesn't happen again. And I think that can be very powerful.
And I think right before we do questions,
Yes.
I think the largest takeaway that we'd like to make sure that you leave this room with is that we do spend a lot of time making sure that our flows do what we want them to do. I'd like to ask you to think about giving equal time to what happens if your flows can't do what you asked it to do. So we want the good and the bad, but we have to plan for both.
Yeah, we talk a lot about handling errors, but a lot of the best defense is a good offense. So if you can make sure that as you're building, always be thinking about where can these go wrong, what can happen to these, where are my errors. The best user experience is the one that doesn't have the errors to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Always, what would happen if the opposite of what I'm asking the system to do happens? All right. Questions, answers, tomatoes?
No tomatoes, please.
Oh.
Never mind.
No. Oh, all right. Fair enough.
What I find the most lacking in flows, why I kind of avoid it, is because if we want to find out, we want to delete this field and we just have the API name of the field, how can we quickly find where it is used in flows and start looking if it's going to throw up any errors if I delete the field?
Yes, on the field and on itself.
Yeah, but within the flow itself, when you see the whole flow, instead of having to clicking on every box.
Oh yes, I see what you're saying. You know somewhere in the flow it's using this field, but you don't know where.
Where?
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a good way to do that yet.
I pull it out into VS Code and I look. But anyway, that's just me.
Yes, yeah. I mean, if you want to go with that, you can. pull out, all these flows can be pulled into VS Code as metadata, and you can do a find in there.
Yeah. Unfortunately,
That's a
for the
little bit more
admins
intense, yes.
of us, there's not really a great way right now. I would love it if they actually put a search function in there.
Yes.
You can search for other things, but not where the field is.
I will say that every time Salesforce comes out with a new release, they add more and more stuff to Flow that I've been waiting for, like testing, and so I imagine that must be somewhere in the roadmap. We don't have any insights into that, but I hope that's in there. And also, I mean, as far as VS Code goes, there's sessions around for like VS Code for admins. There's a lot of good stuff you can use in there.
I am not a developer, like any shape, mirror, form. I learned how to use VS Code to check my metadata from Trailhead.
Yeah.
Check it out. It's a really useful tool for admins to really understand, and help you. It just makes it faster to look at your metadata.
All right. I'm going to go back to the other QR code in case anybody wants to get didn't get the package. There it is. Anyone have any more questions? Right there.
So the majority of times when I get flow errors, it's because validation rules kicked in.
Mm-hmm.
What's the best way to deal with validation rules?
Yes.
Or should you build every validation rule into your flow?
And it's up to you, really. So you could, in your decision, you're going to want to make a decision that if you find these things or if you don't, right? So if your flow does not find the required information, you could maybe open another screen flow that says, please make sure you give me this information. Or there's quite a number of other things that you could do. But you want to think about, well, what do I want to happen if my user doesn't supply the right information for that validation rule? And provide that.
I would say if the flow that you're editing, that you're running is making the change that is throwing the validation error, I would say put some validation checks into your flow itself, so it can handle that more gracefully than the validation database errors will. But obviously, there's going to be some things where this data was put in wrong and the validation rules didn't, were bypassed, and now I'm trying to make a change later. That stuff you're never, it's going to be very hard for you to catch in your flow.
And I'm pretty sure I read, maybe that's the NDA thing. You didn't hear this from me, but
it's just you, me, and our good friends on the internet.
Yeah, Salesforce the Flow team is working on making sure your validation rules your flow is aware of them, so the admin can build them more intelligently.
Also, a lot of stuff we talked about today were more record-triggered flows, which run headless without any any UI. But if you're doing screen flows, if you have any inputs that your user are putting in, you can put validation rules directly on the screen flow, and it'll turn it red. And it's just like if you were doing it on the actual page.
I believe it's similar to the Flow Explorer at the top. Like right now, they're letting you say, what flows are happening on this object. I think it's a similar thing that it'll show you what are the validations that are needed while you're building your flow. It's not yet, though. Yeah.
Anybody else have any more? Right there.
With the recent official change in best practice from one flow per object to as many as your business process requires, which is now the best practice, how are you finding navigating that, like in reality, with like switching from that mindset to the Flow Trigger Explorer mindset?
I find the best way is very good naming conventions.
Yeah.
So if I'm going through flows, I mean, we did a hands-on training back in Rhode Island, and one of the things that you do is you say, like, you name it with, like, you start with account, and then you say you do like BS or AS for before save, after save, or RT or SF for whatever, if it's a record triggered or a screen flow. That way you can, at least by looking at the name of it, you can, when you're looking at the Flow Explorer and it's just like pages upon pages, you can at least sort, you can look at it and know exactly what it's doing.
Yes.
I will say one of the good things that they do now is in the Flow Trigger Explorer, you can order the flows that they run in, so you can actually have a little bit more control over your order of operations as opposed to just whatever order it feels like running at that particular day.
And I do think it's been a little bit of a back and forth. That best practice is very similar from triggers and trigger handlers and that sort of thing. My concept for now for thinking about flows is I try to think about one per object for before save. one for, so you're not going to end up with one, but you'll end up with a lot less.
And you wouldn't just, for example, migrate 81 workflows straight into a flow because it needs.
No, and the other thing while you're migrating things from workflow is make sure you understand, does the business still need this? Why is it
Definitely.
here? Ask, should I be building it into a flow? And that will help more than anything.
Yeah, if that workflow rule started before you got there,
Yes.
maybe look and see if it's still a thing that's being used. Unless you're brand new to your org, in which case, congratulations on your new job.
But still, I would still ask why. Why is this
Yes.
here? And if
One
you
of-
can't answer that question,
Yeah.
you shouldn't be building a new one.
I will say one of the first things I have my new admins and developers do is I'll give them a flow chart. It's like, chart out for me everything that happens when you update an account. Like I want every workflow rule, every process builder, every flow, every Apex trick, map it all out for me, and then let's look at it and see, you know, explain it to them why it's doing what it's doing, and every time we do it, we feel like, oh, we don't really need that anymore.
Yeah.
You had a question over here.
Yeah, it's a slightly random question. I've got some customers on professional edition and some on enterprise edition, so obviously there's like significant limits on professional edition. But I was just wondering with the thing you talked about with running it as a logged in user, is that limited in professional edition? Or can you
I don't believe so. I think that's available
Yeah.
across.
So when you're doing the debugging, when we're talking about the running as a user, this is only available
In the debug
in
menu.
sandbox. You can only do this
Yes.
user in sandboxes.
Correct.
You can't because obviously you don't want seems like a very easy way to get around audits.
It does.
To go in and say I want to run this flow as a different person. But yeah, you have to go into the process automation settings
Turn
in
it
your
on.
sandbox and say allow people to run as other users. And if you click, if it's not enabled, this will be grayed out, and this information little bubble here will tell you exactly what you need to do to turn it on. Any other questions? This side of the room's been awfully quiet. All right, fine.
Less of a question, more of a comment. If you do play with the beta test functionality that they've released, note that it does not deploy via change tests. So if you go to all this effort to make all your tests in sandbox, you'll have to manually recreate them all in production, which, as we've already covered up, you don't want to get anything that flows in
Yeah.
production.
Right.
So
Yeah.
by all means, go and explore the public test, tested stuff that's come out in beta, but be aware of
Yeah.
its limitations right now.
Again.
Expect that to improve in a big way in the next release.
Yeah. If any of you are new to the Salesforce ecosystem, let me explain to you what betas mean for Salesforce.
Go away.
So it means they can go away.
they can.
Also means, technically it means it's not covered by your service agreement. They are not responsible for anything that happens with the beta. You take your life in your own hands. But also more importantly, it generally means you got another 2, maybe 3 releases before it's a worthwhile product that does everything you think it should do right out of the box. Any other questions? I'm still looking at this side of the room. No one's got, all right, fine.
Okay.
It's not supported by Salesforce either.
Yes, yeah. The minute you call Salesforce support, which is already a bad day in my opinion if you're calling Salesforce support, but the minute you call Salesforce support and they find out that you're asking for help with a beta product, they're done. They're
Yep.
like, oh, sorry, we don't support that right now. Hang up on you. Any other questions? We got like 5 more minutes.
Could you just recap when you
Yeah.
showed the screen of where your flow breaks? Because I'm used to like going down the email and then
This one.
where it breaks,
Sure.
So yeah.
Yeah, so like I said, this is a very one-step flow, but this will, normally like the yellow line follows whatever your flow did. So if you hit a decision tree here, it will like, whatever decision it hits.
Debugging the flow, not
Yes.
Not when a real user's done something and we've got an email in your inbox.
Correct.
No, well this will work, this will do both. Basically
Right.
every email you get in your inbox, if you're using the error handling subflows, not those. If you're getting my secret shame emails, for the Salesforce unhandled whatever emails, if you go into these failed flow interviews, you click on the interview, and it will take you into that debug.
Yeah, every flow that fails is going to be there.
At the top of the email, so click here, debug.
Yeah, oh yeah, they also have that on there
Yes.
now too.
So then you just don't need to read it, you just click and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Inherited before with about a million flows
I don't know what that's like.
that has no naming conventions whatsoever. Are there any quick wins in your experience in deciphering some of the noise?
So one of the things that I like doing is, I map it outside of Salesforce. Like at the very least, have them all name. I'll create like a lucid chart, like a process diagram. Even if I'm just putting into them to start out, like here's all the flows that are running before save on an account. And then figuring out, fleshing that out, like what are these doing? You can also go in. You can rename flows.
Yes, you can.
So you can start applying a naming convention as soon as you get in there. There you go.
Yeah.
And that doesn't affect any way that the flow is running. You can go in and you can change those. But yeah, I like mapping it all out so I can see it.
Yep. And I think when you're coming into a new org, that one of the things that I don't think managers understand is that there's a lot of time that needs to be spent for understanding your org before you can do anything. Because you need to be sure about what's going to happen before you make any changes. And that takes time. And yes, making sure you understand not only technically what is the flow doing, but the business reason.
Yeah.
Why is the business asking me to do this?
Also, this particular one, there's a lot of integrations.
Yeah.
Yes.
Necessarily
Oh,
just stuff.
yeah. I will also say, be nice to your successor and document things. No one does because everyone wants to pay the misery forward, but document stuff. You'll make someone very happy someday.
What naming convention do you suggest for subflows and main flows? Any tips on that?
Yeah, I'll usually throw, like I said, I'll throw subflow at the beginning of it if it's just intended to be like called by another thing. Like I said, I'll do a lot of like, if it's a main flow, like I said, I'll do like name of the object first. If it's record trigger, or maybe I'll do like RT for record triggered first. Object name, before or after, and then a quick description of like what it's doing.
Yep.
But like as long as you get that like piece at the beginning set up right and get it consistent is the important thing.
Yes. And then, use abbreviations in the title, but then really fill out the description field of
Yes.
what is this flow intended to do.
The other thing you can do with the description field is you can change that every time you change the version.
Yes.
So I use that a lot for like the initial one will be like here's the description of what it is, but then when I'm like saving it as a new version, I'll put in the description there like here's what I changed about it. So I can go and if I can look at the history of my flow and see like oh well here's what the changes were to it. It's kind of like a mini source control for that in that
Well, and
respect.
theoretically, you could go back to an earlier version and
Yes.
start from there.
Mhm.
So.
Right here. Thank you for this side of the room.
Woo!
Record trigger flow. So at the start of the session, you said, yes, users get this horrible error message at the bottom. Fine. And you're emailing yourself an output of the error message. What about the user? We're not actually told the user anything about what happens in the flow. Have you got any best practices that we can tell the user when it's gone wrong?
I think it really depends on what your situation is, right? So like, does the user need to know that the thing that they're doing hasn't worked? Maybe, maybe not. So each situation is going to be a little different, and you want to think about, in this situation, if something doesn't go right, what do I want the user to know and or supply me new information? And then keep going. So it really is situational, but there are lots of options. So you just want to think about through whatever your scenario is. Yeah.
I think for the screen flows, we can add a screen.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Right. So
definitely add an error screen.
yes, and then maybe you can allow them to push a button that goes back to the and resupply something or yeah.
Not possible in record trigger flow. So
No, but the record trigger flows. That's really, you want to know about it so you can fix it.
Yeah.
And maybe you're intended something, the user was intending to do something and it's not done and you need to help.
Right, and in your error handling subflow, because one of the things, I think it's a little bit further down here, that one of the things you're passing to the flow, the subflow is what flow caused it.
Yes.
And if you have a flow that is critical path, like this has to be done immediately, and if it's not working immediately, that's a problem. That's the one where you like make it send you like 5 Slack messages and like start like sounding off alarms in your office.
Right.
But if it's something that's like, oh well, as long as it's fine by the end of the day, or if it's fine by the end of the week, or no one's even going to notice if it's wrong, I just fix it whenever I'm ready. Then you make those a little bit less noisy in your subflow.
Do you run the subflow as a system?
Usually, yeah, I think that'd be
Usually
a
I
good
do
practice,
because
yes.
I'm not, in my subflow, I'm not intending on changing any data whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to make sure I'm handling that.
Or
So
yeah.
I would send it.
Or if the only time I'm editing data is, like I said before, if you want to create like a custom object for you to track your errors, but you don't just want to give that access to
True.
your entire company because they're not going to know what to do with it. Not because you're trying to hide anything from them. I never try to hide anything from my users.
Do you have any suggestions for the maybe multiple DML operations on multiple objects in a single flow?
Yeah, so if you're doing multiple DML operations in a single flow, obviously you have to be careful because then that's where you start getting to, like, if you're running on bulk and a lot of records, you can only do, I want to say in a certain, if it's running in time with it, you can only do 50 edits, 50 DML operations. So you definitely want to make sure, I think it's 50, don't quote me on that. But so you definitely want to be careful around there. Collection variables are your friend in that situation.
Yep.
Same as, I mean, in Apex, we always make sure that, like, nothing is happening inside of a loop. Same thing in flows. Don't have any ping. Nothing ping should be in your flow, in your loop. It should be saving it to a collection object, and then at the end of that loop, you're making one DML operation at the end.
Yep.
Did I answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Anyone else got anything? We're now over time, but
Yeah, we
they're not
gotta get
kicking us
out
out
of here.
yet, so.